Okay, we're getting ready to prime our Mills Miniatures models here, but first I just wanted to show you I washed the models, I cleaned them. It went pretty well, a little bit more work than I had expected. The Gazantes and the Sea Rock went really well. You can see they actually even look more transparent than they did during the box opening. They look pretty good. The only one I had a little bit of trouble with, and I'll show you here, was the Hammerhead. The Hammerhead, as you can see here, on the lower mandible on the front here, it was really rough. I had a hard time getting in there and cleaning that up. It's still a little bit more frosted and a little rougher. I had to get in there with a toothpick in the lines to try and bring out the definition in them. Initially, I could barely see them. Hopefully you can see there that they're a little bit more defined now. I'm hoping that during painting that everything will look good. Hopefully the priming that we're going to do in a minute here is going to help smooth things out. Before we get to the priming, I'm going to be using these coffee stirrers in order to help hold the model. The one problem with these is they are a little bit large for these models. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp the end here, and that should make these a little bit more secure. I do this for squadrons all the time. Now, squadrons are a little bit lighter. I'm not as worried about dropping them as I am with these. I don't want to drop these, so I'm going to be really careful with these. I'm wearing plastic gloves because I'm going to spray the bottom of these first, right into my hand, and then put them on the stick so that I'm not flipping it upside down too much. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to get ready to prime these now. I'm going to be using Citadel Corax White. I like to use white as my primer. Just a personal preference. It's a couple dollars cheaper than most other colors. Sometimes with the Imperial stuff you can get away with priming it gray, but I always like to put on a base coat after priming. The priming for me is really about creating a surface for my other paints to adhere to. It's not about the color, and it's going to be a lot easier to color over white than other colors. And why spend any more money for this? This is very expensive anyways. I do recommend going with the Citadel. Don't go with some hardware spray paint to do this. This is made for small plastic models, this kind of stuff. I find it works great. Spend a little bit of extra money to get this, but just I don't have any reason for you to get anything other than white. So I've already also follow the instructions in the can. This one says to shake it for 2 minutes. I'm not going to do that. I've already done that. But if it says to shake it for 2 minutes, shake it for 2 minutes. And I always say, don't count your 2 minutes until you hear the marble shaking in the can. If you've got a new can or you haven't used it for a while, sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to get that marble going. So don't start counting your 2 minutes until you get that marble moving. So we're gonna get to priming here. So I'm gonna start with one of the Gazantes. I've got my stick and I've got a board here set up for them to dry on. I'm going to start by doing the underside. Now when you're spray painting, a lot of people just want to spray like crazy and hold the button down forever. I don't do that. Be quick, swift strokes, on, off, on, off, on, off. And always on, off, back and forth. That way you get the best coverage you can. I'm going to do the bottom here. Alright, and you can see there we've got pretty good coat on the bottom there. You don't have to go crazy with this. You're just creating a surface for the paint to adhere to. So now I'm going to get our straw, recrimp it a little bit, get it back on the post. Now I'm going to keep this pretty upright here. And this dish here, I want to make sure I get under that. So it's going to be a couple of sprays here. Definitely a couple of parts there that were a little bit tricky to get into, but if you can see there, it looks like it's got a pretty good coat of paint on it. Pretty happy with that. You can see some of the definition of the lines is starting to come out already. That the material that it comes in, it's that translucentness to it makes it a little bit difficult to see. So I'm going to quickly go through and prime the rest of these, and then we're going to get to painting. Okay, I'm going to let those dry now. The paint says that it dries within 15 minutes. I give it a little bit longer. It's a little bit more humid today. It was raining earlier, so I'm going to give them plenty of time to dry, at least an hour, probably more, before I put on the base coat of paint. Okay, so now we're gonna put on our base coat for the Gazantes only. We'll do another video for the Sea Rock and another one for the Hammerhead. For the Gazantes, our base coat is going to be Citadel Celestial Gray. This is what I use for most Imperial base coats for TIE fighters, things like that. Works pretty well. In terms of paint, what I suggest with this is you do need to shake it well. I've already shaken it. When you're purchasing paint, always shake it in the store. If you can't feel the paint sloshing around, or if it's separated and if you shake it and you can't get it to remix, don't buy it. Only buy the paint if you pick it up and you can shake it and it sloshes around and you get a nice smooth coating on the inside of the bottle. These bottles are semi-transparent. Then you're good to go. I've purchased a couple where I didn't do that and got burned a little bit, where you get this big clump of paint in the middle that won't remix, and the paint just doesn't last as long. For doing models like this, a bottle like this is going to last you quite a while. It is fairly expensive. I do like the Citadel. Not a huge fan of Testors, and I haven't really tried Army painter. Citadel is what I can find easiest around here, so that's what I use, and it works really well. So what we're gonna do is, I've already shaken this. We'll open it up, and for brushes, this happens to be a Citadel brush. These tend to be a little bit on the expensive side. I don't find the value in the extra cost of these as much as I do the paints. I get a lot of brushes like these other ones from like Michael's or AC Moore, another arts and crafts store. They're a lot cheaper. They might not last quite as long, but you can probably get 4 or 5 of those brushes for the cost of one of these. So it's just your preference. But I don't tend to buy the Citadel brushes much anymore. I have a few that I still use though. So with the Gazanti, I'm going to use the coffee stirrer again, but I'm going to, just like we did with the primer, I'm going to start on the bottom. If you look at the model, the details have come out quite a bit just with the primer. You can see a lot of the lines and the detailing on there. Looks really good. I mean, it's white, it's not what you want at the end, but you can really see where we're going with it. So with the paint, I'm going to put the model down for a second. With the paint, I always take some water. I use a tray. If you notice this, it's just one of the trays from one of the large model FFG Armada boxes. I keep these, clean them up, just give them a little wash, and then I just use them for my paint palettes. A lot cheaper that way. Load up your brush with some water, get it on the palette, and then you're going to take some paint and mix it in until it's nice and smooth. Always water your paints down a little bit. And if you're going for a really dull color, you can water them down even more. But for this, that looks pretty good. You got a nice smooth texture to it. I'm going to work a little bit of paint out of the brush here. And then we're going to just evenly coat the whole thing. And this model, I'm going to just cover the whole thing with gray. And that's going to be our base coat. In the next video, I will be we'll be shading and adding some details and highlights. There's actually not a lot in terms of the highlights that we're going to be doing with the Gazantis. There's going to be a lot more that we're going to be doing with the Hammerheads, for the Hammerhead and the Sea Rock. But that's a good coat on the bottom. So we're going to switch. We're going to put our stick back on there. And you can see the gray compared to the white there. Hopefully you can see that. So we're going to take our stick and just going to keep going over the whole thing. This is probably in some ways the easiest but also most boring steps, because you're just covering the whole thing. And like I had said while I was priming, I could have just primed this gray. That's what some people do, and then they just go from there. Like I said, I just prefer, because I feel like with the spraying, I can occasionally miss a tiny bit. By doing it this way, when I go back over the white, I'm making sure that I cover everything with the gray and I'm getting the color that I want out of it. I'm not worried about missing something with the spray. Now this model, there's a tiny gap here between this upper dish and the front part of the ship. I'm not going to worry too much about it, but I'm just going to try and get some paint tucked in there. And again, you know, everyone's different. I don't consider myself a great painter. I just do my best. I think they look really good when you're playing the game. That's all I care about, is how they look playing the game. With the squadrons, a lot of times, yeah, if you hold them up, you know, 2 inches from your face, they're not going to look too good. But sitting on the game board when you're playing with somebody and everything's in motion, they look a lot better than the plain unpainted models, for sure. And when you're talking about TIE fighters, they only last a turn or two anyway, so why are you spending all that time painting them if they're going to be off the board in a matter of a turn or two? So again, this isn't, it's gonna look kind of like it did after we primed it, except it's going to be gray instead. I am using my finger to just hold it still on the stirrer a little bit. Make sure I hit everything. And I am going to just paint both Gazantes the same. There are some Canon pictures that show some red highlights on Gazantes. That's fine. I don't need that. I like to just think of the Emperor as being uniform and gray and everything is immaculate type of a thing, which in some ways can make painting Imperial stuff boring, but it does make painting Imperial stuff easier. When we get to the Sea Rock and the Hammerhead, it's going to be a lot more roughness to it and battle damage that we're gonna work in, because between the Scum and Villainy and the Rebels, they cared a lot more about function than the way they appeared orbiting over your planet. They wanted to make sure everything worked more than they cared about how they appeared, which just meant things looked a lot more beat up. So there's our first one. It looks pretty good with gray. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm going to paint the second one. And then our next video we'll be doing shading, highlighting, and some detail work, and then we should be done. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, click subscribe and click the little bell down below for any notifications if you want to see more of these videos. We'll be having a lot more for these models coming up very soon. So thank you very much.